The sound of heavy machinery tearing through walls echoed across Cedar Lakes subdivision on what started as just another Tuesday morning, but this wasn't just another house demolition. Little did the members of the Cedar Lakes Homeowners Association realize that they had just ordered the complete destruction of a federal agent's home, setting in motion a chain of events that would forever change their exclusive community. Sarah Chen, a seasoned FBI special agent with 15 years of experience in financial crimes investigations, had been away for weeks on a classified undercover operation targeting organized crime syndicates. Her meticulous attention to detail in her professional life had earned her numerous commendations, but it was an administrative error in HOA paperwork that would lead to the most shocking incident in the subdivision's history. Jim Morrison, the autocratic HOA president who had spent his career as a real estate attorney before retirement, prided himself on running the tightest ship in suburban Florida. His board of directors, a well-meaning group of residents who had simply wanted to maintain property values, had unknowingly become pawns in what would become one of the most stunning cases of property destruction ever to face a homeowners association. The luxury homes of Cedar Lakes, with their manicured lawns and strict aesthetic guidelines, were about to become the backdrop for an unprecedented showdown between local authority and federal power. The morning fog hung low over Cedar Lakes as residents began their daily routines, unaware that today would mark the beginning of an unprecedented conflict. For 6 months, 342 Willow Creek Lane had sat perfectly maintained, its emerald lawn regularly tended by automated sprinklers and its pristine white exterior gleaming under the Florida sun. What neighbors didn't know was that their HOA had been playing a dangerous game of bureaucratic telephone, sending violation notices to an address that didn't match their records. The administrative assistant who had initially entered Sarah Chen's information had transposed 2 numbers, creating a phantom address that would never receive the mounting stack of warnings. Meanwhile, Sarah was deep undercover, living as Michelle Rodriguez, a financial consultant helping to launder money for a criminal organization. Her real home, complete with her FBI credentials, personal weapons, and classified case files, sat vulnerable while she gathered evidence thousands of miles away. Jim Morrison had noticed the non-responsive homeowner during his monthly drive-through inspections of the neighborhood. The Honda Civic in the driveway hadn't moved in weeks, and the curtains remained perpetually drawn. His years as a real estate attorney had taught him that abandoned properties could quickly become neighborhood eyesores, potentially dragging down property values for everyone. What he hadn't learned was the importance of proper address verification and due process. The first real red flag should have been when the registered mail was returned as undeliverable, but Morrison interpreted this as further evidence of abandonment rather than a clerical error. He rallied his board members during an emergency meeting, painting a dramatic picture of squatters, liability issues, and plummeting home values. Board member Patricia Williams voiced concerns about the rush timeline, suggesting they hire a private investigator to locate the owner, but Morrison's forceful personality and legal background dominated the discussion. The other board members, including retired teacher Robert Kim and small business owner Maria Gonzalez, ultimately deferred to Morrison's expertise, trusting his interpretation of the HOA's broad emergency powers clause. By month 3, Morrison had convinced the board that they were dealing with what he termed a hostile abandonment situation. He cited precedent from other HOAs who had successfully reclaimed and sold abandoned properties, generating revenue for community improvements. The board authorized him to proceed with the 7-step abandoned property protocol, failing to notice that several crucial steps involving multiple verification attempts had been inadequately completed. The local sheriff's department conducted a perfunctory welfare check, but finding no signs of distress and noting the property's maintenance, they closed their investigation without further inquiry. This bureaucratic blind spot would prove costly. Morrison hired Davidson Demolition, a company known for efficient teardowns of condemned properties. Mike Davidson, the company owner, had worked with the HOA before and trusted Morrison's legal expertise. When Davidson mentioned the odd details he'd noticed, like the recently mowed lawn and the expensive security system still blinking on the doorframe, Morrison dismissed these concerns as signs of automated maintenance systems set up before the abandonment. The demolition was scheduled for a Wednesday, precisely 6 months after the first undelivered notice. Social media posts in the Cedar Lakes Facebook group mentioned the upcoming demolition, with residents expressing mixed feelings about losing such a beautiful home. Some questioned the speed of the process, while others praised Morrison's decisive leadership in preventing the property from becoming a liability. Tuesday night, Sarah Chen completed her undercover operation with the successful arrest of 5 major money laundering targets. Exhausted but triumphant, she flew back to Jacksonville, looking forward to a long shower in her own bathroom and sleep in her own bed. Her FBI-issued phone had been deliberately kept off during the operation's final phase, leaving her blissfully unaware of the 17 missed calls from her next-door neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, who had been trying to warn her about the demolition notices. The morning of the demolition, heavy machinery rolled into Cedar Lakes at precisely 7 a.m., as stipulated by county noise ordinances. Neighbors gathered behind security tape, some filming the spectacle on their phones. Mrs. Thompson kept calling Sarah's phone, growing increasingly frantic as she watched the excavator position itself outside the front door. The demolition crew worked with practiced efficiency, first removing the roof, then systematically dismantling walls. Sarah's hardwood floors, imported from sustainable forests in Oregon, splintered under the weight of falling debris. Her grandmother's china cabinet, carefully restored and filled with family heirlooms, disappeared into a cloud of dust. The underground safe containing her service weapon, backup credentials, and classified documents was exposed when they removed the foundation slab. By noon, what had been a $450,000 home was reduced to a pile of rubble, twisted rebar, and broken dreams. The demolition crew worked through lunch, eager to complete the job ahead of schedule. Morrison supervised from his golf cart, periodically responding to neighbors' questions with practiced explanations about HOA authority and abandoned property statutes. He took photos with his phone, planning to use them as evidence of the board's diligent property management during the next annual meeting. The irony that he was photographing evidence of his own catastrophic error never occurred to him. By mid-afternoon, the rubble had been loaded into dump trucks and hauled away, leaving only a bare patch of earth where Sarah Chen's life had stood just hours before. The sprinkler system, severed during demolition, leaked into the remaining soil, creating muddy puddles that reflected the late afternoon sun. Morrison declared the operation a complete success, praising Davidson Demolition's efficiency and his board's decisive action in protecting the community's property values. As the sun set over Cedar Lakes, Sarah Chen's flight touched down at Jacksonville International Airport. Her phone finally powered on and immediately flooded with notifications. The Uber driver navigated through familiar streets as Sarah scrolled through her notifications, her initial relief at being home slowly morphing into confusion and then terror. 17 missed calls from Mrs. Thompson, 12 text messages, and 3 voicemails all mentioning emergency and demolition had her heart racing as she speed-dialed her neighbor. Mrs. Thompson's voice cracked with distress as she explained the day's events, her words tumbling over each other in a rush of guilt and disbelief. "It's gone, Sarah. Everything. They tore it down this morning. I tried calling but couldn't reach you. The HOA said it was abandoned, but I kept telling them you lived there." Morrison wouldn't listen. The phone slipped from Sarah's trembling hand as the Uber turned onto Willow Creek Lane, where a small crowd still lingered near what should have been her property. Instead of her pristine 2-story colonial with its perfectly manicured azalea bushes, there was only bare earth, muddy and trampled from heavy machinery. Her FBI training kicked in, suppressing the shock as she methodically photographed the scene from every angle, documenting not just the destruction but the gathering dusk that painted everything in surreal shadows. Morrison appeared from the crowd, his self-satisfied expression faltering when he saw Sarah emerge from the vehicle. "Ma'am, this is private HOA business. You'll need to move along," he said with his practiced authoritative tone, failing to recognize the woman whose life he had just erased. Sarah's voice remained steady as she introduced herself, badge credentials in hand. "I'm Special Agent Sarah Chen, Federal Bureau of Investigation. This was my home." The color drained from Morrison's face as the magnitude of his error crystallized. Neighbors who had been filming the aftermath suddenly raised their phones again, capturing this moment of bureaucratic reckoning. Patricia Williams, who had harbored doubts during the board meeting, stood frozen as the implications cascaded through her mind. The crowd that had gathered out of curiosity now found themselves witnesses to what would become the most documented HOA mistake in history. Sarah's professional demeanor cracked momentarily as she surveyed the destruction, thinking of her grandmother's china, her father's purple heart medal, and 15 years of carefully curated memories reduced to rubble. But anger quickly replaced grief as she realized the depth of procedural violations that had led to this moment. Within hours, Sarah had contacted her FBI supervisor, who immediately dispatched a forensic team to the site. The presence of federal agents transformed the neighborhood into what resembled a crime scene, with yellow tape cordoning off the area and residents being questioned about the timeline of events. Morrison's attempts to frame this as a legal HOA action became increasingly desperate as federal investigators uncovered the cascade of errors and ignored protocols. The paperwork trail revealed not just clerical mistakes but a pattern of cavalier disregard for proper procedure that extended beyond this incident. By evening, local news vans lined the street as the story exploded across social media. FBI agent's home demolished by HOA trended nationally, with cable news picking up the story by the 10 o'clock broadcasts. Legal experts began weighing in, discussing potential civil rights violations, destruction of federal property, and the possible criminal implications of destroying an FBI agent's official documents and equipment. The underground safe that had been exposed during demolition contained not just Sarah's service weapon but also classified case files that now required FBI cybersecurity teams to assess potential breaches. Within 24 hours, Jim Morrison received notification of being personally named in a federal lawsuit seeking damages exceeding $2 million. The HOA's insurance company representatives arrived en masse, their faces growing increasingly pale as they reviewed the documentation and realized the scope of their liability exposure. Board members who had deferred to Morrison's authority found themselves individually named in multiple lawsuits, their personal assets potentially at risk. Maria Gonzalez broke down during her FBI interview, describing how Morrison had pressured the board into quick action despite her advocating for additional verification steps. The legal implications extended beyond civil court, as federal prosecutors began investigating whether Morrison's destruction of classified documents constituted obstruction of justice or interference with federal law enforcement operations. Sarah moved into a local hotel while her FBI colleagues worked to reconstruct her compromised cases, some of which had been painstakingly built over years of undercover work. The full extent of the damage went beyond mere financial metrics as she struggled to remember which cases had files stored in her home office versus her government workspace. The intersection of personal and professional devastation created a complexity that even experienced FBI trauma specialists found challenging to address. By the week's end, the Cedar Lakes HOA faced a complete organizational collapse. Insurance representatives announced they would be withdrawing coverage for the entire community, citing the board's willful negligence and failure to follow established protocols. Property values, which Morrison had been so eager to protect, plummeted as potential buyers learned about the legal chaos engulfing the neighborhood. The story became a cautionary tale used in HOA management seminars across the country, with the Cedar Lakes incident becoming shorthand for catastrophic failure in community governance. Morrison's resignation came via a terse email to remaining board members, though his legal troubles were just beginning. The demolition company found itself caught in the legal crossfire, facing questions about their due diligence in accepting the work order. The ripple effects extended to the county permitting office, which had apparently approved the demolition based on HOA documentation without conducting independent verification. Federal oversight of HOA operations in the area increased dramatically, with new regulations requiring multiple verification steps for any property-related enforcement actions. 6 months later, Sarah stood outside a new home, purchased through a combination of federal reimbursements and legal settlements. The house was larger than her previous one, though she'd never recover the sentimental items destroyed by Morrison's hubris. Her testimony before Congress led to the HOA Accountability Act, requiring all community associations to implement extensive verification procedures before taking any action that could result in property damage. The Cedar Lakes HOA ceased to exist entirely, with the neighborhood transitioning to direct county oversight. Morrison faced disbarment proceedings and filed for personal bankruptcy as legal fees and settlement costs mounted. The demolition site, now owned by the county following a complex legal settlement, became a small park with a plaque commemorating the importance of due process and proper notification in community governance. The park's official name, Agent Chen Memorial Park, honored not just her personal loss but the broader principle that even in the pursuit of community improvement, proper procedure and respect for individual rights must remain paramount. Sarah often walked past on evening strolls, finding a strange peace in seeing children play where her former life once stood, a reminder that even from the most catastrophic mistakes, community can eventually heal and grow wiser for the experience.